and welcome back to For All Stages and Ages, the podcast for parents that are looking for some advice on various parenting issues. On today's show, we have got Sammy, and she is going to come on and have a little chat with us about home education and homeschooling. Homeschooling if you're in the USA, home education if you're in the UK, but essentially they're kind of the same. But yeah, lovely to have you on the show, Sammy. Welcome to the For All Stages and Ages podcast. How are you?
Hey, thank you so much for having me on today. I really appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. So, Sammy, you are homeschooling. You're a homeschooling parent at the moment, and you're also running a business as well. So, can you start by telling us a little bit about your journey? What made you make the leap into homeschooling, especially after kind of previously, I know you previously sort of advocated for public schooling, didn't you, as well? So
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, I was a teacher and I taught here in the United States. I taught in Kentucky and I taught English as a second language. I
Okay.
was a big advocate for public education, and the more that I taught, the more that I saw the problems with teaching, and the more I saw the problems with the education system as a whole, especially in terms of behaviors of children. The main reason I left was not the kids, but I did notice that a lot of the good kids and a lot of the kids who did what was expected of them and asked of them were really struggling with having to deal with the behaviors of other kids. And the schools, and I fully support public education still. I'm not an advocate for it as much anymore, but I understand there's nothing they can do. Their hands are tied.
Yeah.
So I do understand that. But when my son started school, he has anxiety and he went to kindergarten. My mom is also a teacher, so it just seemed like the fifth thing. I really wanted to keep my kids home, but I didn't think I could run my business and do everything I needed to do to make money and take care of my kids while also homeschooling them. So I ended up sending my son to kindergarten, and he was constantly telling me that the teacher was yelling and it was loud. And I knew the teacher. We went to high school together. I'm not going to say she wasn't yelling because I wasn't in the room, but I highly doubt it was to the extent that my son said it was. And that was my first indication that maybe regular school wasn't right for my son. He was just really struggling with some of the behaviors. He also had, and I know this from what he said, and the teachers and my mom couldn't tell me anything because of confidentiality rules and laws. But from what my son told me, there was a very difficult child in the room who threw things like chairs, and they had to evacuate the classroom. And so it was very nerve-wracking for him. He was very scared. So at the end of the year, I decided to try homeschooling. And we did it for a couple of months. And I freaked out on myself. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to run a business. I did the same thing. So I sent him to school for first grade. Same thing happened. It was just loud all the time. And I've been a teacher, so I understand. Even if you have great classroom management skills, it's difficult to get the kids to stop talking, especially after the pandemic happened. It's just gotten worse. And so my son really was struggling with anxiety. He was crying, not wanting to go to school. He was sick every single day. I'm like sick to his stomach, things that just went along with stress and anxiety in general. And about the time that we got an actual diagnosis of anxiety, I decided, okay, we've got to do something. This is not working for him. So we did an online program. We pulled him out, and we decided to pull my daughter out as well. She was not getting the speech services I thought she needed. She had an IEP and was on speech services. And also she just did, if I was going to homeschool one, why not homeschool the other? My son was really struggling with reading, and no one was concerned about it but me, because he was slightly below average. Well, I know my son, and I know he's capable of more than below average. So I started him with tutoring with a friend of mine, and we started homeschooling so that I could be the one in control of his education, and I could make sure that I knew what he was being taught, but also really because the environment really wasn't conducive for learning for him. It was not a place where he could thrive.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how the school system is sort of set up in the US, but in the UK, on average, it's a 30 children classroom, and as a parent, I've got 2 children, and having them is hard enough to manage, and they're my children. So I can't imagine what it's like having 30 children in a classroom. I think it's way too big, but like you said, the public school systems, they're hands are tied with space. You know, they're trying to shove as many children as they can into one room and trying to teach them all at the same time, all the same materials. And I've considered home educating my little boy. My little boy has, well, he's not been diagnosed yet, but he is in the process of getting the diagnosis for autism. And one of my issues has been around the fact that, you know, he's a very individual child. You know, all children are individual. And what I don't like about the public school system is the curriculum that they follow. I know from my education when I was at school, I was absolutely atrocious at maths. I've always been terrible at maths. It wasn't that I didn't want to learn maths. I did. I really wanted to learn, but it just didn't go in. No matter what anyone told me, it did not go in. Or by the time it did go in, they'd moved on to another topic of maths. And by that time, I'd forgotten what it was that they were trying to teach me. And I just think that, you know, when you're trying to teach that many children, you don't find out what their potential is. You're not trying to reach that one individual's, you know, why does one individual need to know maths if they want to maybe go into a specific job that never requires maths? I've never needed it. You know, the little bit of maths that I've ever needed, I can use a calculator for. You know, there are a lot of jobs out there that don't require certain things. But then you've got children coming out of schools that can't read properly, they can't write properly. They don't teach them life skills, I think, as well. I think that a lot of the time it would be useful to teach children how to manage their money, how to apply for mortgages, how to, you know, get legal services if they need them in the future, you know, just general kind of, this is how you need to live your life as a human being, rather than a very rudimentary kind of maths and English thing. So I've been thinking about it, but I know my side of it, similar to you, so maybe you can explain this, is how you have managed to kind of do it while you're running a business or maintaining a job as well. Because I think that is primarily the number one concern of a lot of parents, is they think, well, I don't, you know, how am I going to work if I've got my children here all the time?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing that you need to consider is what the laws are for where you live. So in the US, it differs by state. Where we used to live in Kentucky, it was a little more strict than where we live now, which is in Mississippi. And basically, we just have to have a certain number of days a year that we do our schooling. There's not a certain number of hours necessarily. And then you have to be creative, or you have to think outside the box. Not necessarily creative, but you have to think outside the box. So Mondays are my busiest day with work. We only do every other Monday. We still have scheduled our 170 something days that are required of us, but we don't do Mondays every week because I can't always do Mondays. That's when I have my client meetings. That's when I do things like this. That's when I meet with people. So it just doesn't work out for us to do Mondays. And then aside from that, there's no one said you have to do it during typical work or typical school hours. And that was something that I really struggled to get my husband on board with, because he was not on board with homeschooling. He did not like the idea of it. It's definitely grown on him, but he was not into it when I first started. I think the only reason he agreed was because of my education and background, and he knew that I had the skills to make sure that they were successful. So some days it looks like my kids are playing all day and I have to stop periodically to get snacks or drinks. And my kids are 6 and 8 right now. So, you know, they don't need me to do everything with them. But my kids have been home with me since they were 2 and 4. So we've kind of had to figure things out. I work luckily, whenever I have a chance to. So I've been up for several hours working before they wake up. I will work after they go to bed, and then I work through the day, but I take frequent breaks. And then with the homeschooling, because of my flexible schedule, we typically homeschool after my husband gets home from work. And so our evening is very packed full, but there's no set hours. And that's the great thing, is we can do whatever works for us. Then we also work on Saturdays, because we don't work on Mondays. We work on Saturdays. And again, some people think it has to be Monday through Friday, and it doesn't. That's the great thing about it. It doesn't. So we work on Saturdays, and we usually do 3 to 4 hours a day, which is actually more than a lot of other people with kids my kids' age. I'm a more traditional homeschooler, so that has an effect on that. And then some days we work on Sundays. If we wake up and my schedule is super full that day, we will say, hey, this is what we're going to do today. We're going to play outside. Mom's going to work, and we're going to work on Sunday this week. So the thing is just to be flexible and open to different things, because you never know what's going to happen one day. The kids could wake up and be sick, or I could have surprise meetings. I actually, I run people's businesses. So they may have a business emergency that I've got to attend to. And we just make it work for us. And that's the important thing to remember, is that you can make it work for you, and you have to figure out what's going to work. Now, I am lucky enough that my kids can be easily entertained without me. So some people have to find babysitter or childcare through the day, but my kids do stay home with me, and we do limited screen time, but they have activities they can do. I print off coloring sheets, word searches. My son plays with Legos literally all day long. So we try to incorporate other things as well, and then also just things that they can do by themselves. So part of homeschooling, you get to choose what they do. We incorporate cooking into our homeschooling. So they help me cook lunch and breakfast. And that includes a lot of different things. That's math and reading. And then also we spend quite a bit of time outside. We do live in the southern United States, so it's still pretty warm here right now. And, we spend a lot of time outside and just doing different things. So I do have the luxury that I am able to take my work wherever I want to. And not everyone has that. But it's all about making it work for your family. What is good for your kids and your family?
Yeah. I think the key thing there is like you said, the flexibility and allowing yourself to be flexible with it. That I think there's a big misconception around homeschooling, is that it's and I know in the UK, I don't know whether they do it in the US, is something called deschooling. So you have to kind of de-school yourself. You have to get yourself out of that public school kind of mindset of that. Homeschooling is not the same. It does not require you to sit your child down at a desk for 6 to 8 hours and you sitting next to them, reading them something or teaching them something. It can be, like you say, cooking dinner with them, and you're incorporating so many things with cooking. You're doing the cooking element, but there's also science that you can incorporate in that, with boiling temperatures and, what happens if you put this ingredient with that ingredient, and what does this do? And there's going for a walk with them. You can go and do a science or a nature walk and do things that way. And I think in the UK, on average, people are doing about 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day, if that. And that can be split, from half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the afternoon, and then maybe half an hour in the evening. So it can be done however they want it to work for their family. So I think, like you say, flexibility is kind of the key thing, and it's just finding how it works for you and your family as well.
Yeah, and another thing, like with the 6 hours a day, you don't really take into consideration, unless you've been a teacher or been in a classroom, how much of that time is actually managing the students versus how much is actually teaching and doing the application of the teaching. When you consider that, it's nothing. There's so much time that goes into corralling the students and transitioning from one activity to another. And when you don't have 30 students to manage, you only have 1 to 2, however many kids you have at home. It's a huge difference in managing 2 kids compared to 30. And getting them to move from one activity to another takes 30 seconds instead of 2 minutes. So it all adds up. And then they don't include like bathroom breaks. I taught middle school, so they had 5 minutes in between each class. That's not something we have to worry about now. And then lunch breaks, you don't have to worry about that time either. They're not learning during lunch. They're not doing that at school. So that's just something that doesn't get taken into account either. The time that kids are actually learning in school is a lot less than 6 hours a day.
Yeah. And you're catering to your child's individual requirements as well. So if there is something particularly that they're good at, you can focus more on that subject. If they really enjoy art, you can incorporate art into more of their learning than they would do in school, for example, where they get a half an hour lesson on art and that's it, and they're told what they've got to draw, they're told what they've got to paint and things like that. They can be a bit more creative at home and allow that child's individualism to kind of come to the forefront, rather than you've got to behave like every other child in this classroom. You've got to do what every other child in this classroom does. And I think that's where public schools fall down is that once they start pigeonholing children and they start putting them all into one specific box, they're pushing each of their individualities into one box. And that's where you're starting to cause the problems, because not all children are the same, and they don't all learn the same. They don't all learn at the same pace. They don't all, follow the same path in life. And unfortunately, that's what public school tries to get them to do. So homeschooling allows your child to be individual and maintain that individuality. So you help other businesses kind of streamline their businesses. How do you kind of manage homeschooling? Do you have any sort of systems or routines you put into place to kind of keep a track of what you're doing?
Yeah, so because I have that project management experience, we actually use Trello, which is like a basic project management app, to have a plan for the day. And so I'll tell the kids, this is what we've got going on for today. And, we have a little card for each day of the week, and they have individual activities that on there that they can do by themselves. So they have a handwriting activity. They do not need me to go get their handwriting workbook and do a page in their handwriting book. So they look at that every day and they go and do that. And then we spend 30 minutes on an app called Epic, where they read a book, and they have to read one by themselves, and then the rest of them they can do audiobooks. So they spend 30 minutes a day on that. That's something they can do by themselves. It's on their iPad. They're already logged in. And so those are the kind of systems that we create, is that we have some things that they need to do on their own every day that they know, this is what I have to do by lunch. This is what I have to do after lunch. And then when mom is done working, we're going to do this together. And so just kind of creating that schedule and routine. Again, we're really big on flexibility. So if something doesn't happen perfectly, we're okay with that. But we do have like a list of things that do need to be done every single day, because we are obviously trying to learn and get things done. So I definitely think having some kind of routine, they don't necessarily have to do them in order, but knowing that there's a list of things they need to do before lunch and a list of things they need to do after lunch is very helpful in getting them organized and being kind of responsible for their own learning, which is a thing I think that public schools really struggle with as well. It's getting kids to be accountable for themselves. There's a lot of accountability placed on the teachers and not on the kids.
Yeah.
And I think that this has been a great way for me to say, hey, go look at your list. What do you need to do? And then they get to choose, what am I going to read today? What handwriting page do I want to do? And we have fun little handwriting pages. So they get to choose, it gets to be, they get to be in charge of their own learning that way. So those are some of the things. And also we are very big on our Alexa. If you do not have something like that at home, I highly suggest it. But we will set timers on our Alexa. Hey, Alexa, can you set a 20-minute timer for handwriting? Can you set a 30-minute handwriting or a 30-minute timer for this? And those sort of things. We have reminders on our Alexa we take some classes on OutSchool. We have reminders. Hey, get your computers, and you can set a whole routine, and Alexa will tell you, hey, get your computers, guys, because, I'm busy and I'm not paying attention to the clock. Get your computer, let's go, and get logged into OutSchool. So those are the things that we put into place to help us keep organized and on track for the day.
I love the Alexa idea. That's a good idea, because you do forget. I mean, we forget as parents anyway, don't we? But
Yes, all the
I think
time.
having Alexa there as a backup is a great idea, actually. I think one of the other concerns that a lot of parents have around homeschooling is that they worry their child isn't going to have the sort of the social aspect of going to a mainstream school. How do you sort of address that with your homeschooling? It's never been a concern of mine, because I think, well, I take my kid to the park, I take my son to, soft play centres, I take him to various different events, and that's where he meets a lot of his sort of peers. So yeah, I just wanted to see how you kind of address the social aspect for your children.
Yeah, so my first thing is we do not send our kids to school to talk all day.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
amount of time that they're actually talking and interacting with students, with other kids that they're supposed to be, is very limited, no matter what grade level. Like, it's very limited, the social aspect. So that's not what school is for. But the one thing is that my kids are going to be socially awkward because my husband and I are socially awkward. So that's going to happen anyway. And we both went to public school. It's just going to happen because we're all very shy and awkward. But also, my kids are in soccer. My daughter does an art class after school once a week. My son is in some classes on out school where he's with other kids and they get the opportunity. The whole purpose of most of these are for socialization and to talk to other kids. Like, he's in a Minecraft class. He doesn't really need to learn Minecraft, but he gets to talk to other kids and interact with them. And we also felt it was a safe way for him to play Minecraft online. So he does things like that. And my daughter does art classes, and we go to the park. We go to the play place at like Chick-fil-A and McDonald's so that they can play with other kids. I know that's kind of weird, but where else are we supposed to go? They have cousins as well. I mean, they interact with other kids plenty, and we go to the museums. They know how to share. Those are things that they're learning, and they're still doing everything they need to do. They know how to make friends because they're doing it at the park, and they're doing it in soccer and in cheerleading. My daughter's in cheerleading. So if you stay home and you never leave your house, then yes, there's going to be an issue with socialization. But it's likely that's not the case. I don't know very many people who do that. And your kids are going to be just fine because they're going to learn how to talk to other kids. And not to mention, one big thing about school that I particularly don't like is that we try to teach everyone to be friends with everyone. I disagree with that. There are people I just don't like, and there are
Yeah.
people who just don't like me, and that's okay. As long as we're not mean to each other, I think that's okay. And at school, I feel like they really push that and make kids feel like they have to talk to people who bother them. So that's another thing. Like, and they do have to learn how to deal with people who bother them because that's life. But there are also lessons that can be learned outside of school, like at the playground and at the library. And again, if you're staying home all the time, your kids are not getting that. But most people aren't doing that. Most homeschoolers I know are very active in their communities. They do co-ops. We personally don't do a co-op because we don't have a good one close that fits our schedule. But there are co-ops, there are other homeschooling groups, there are libraries. So there are plenty of opportunities to be around other kids and make friends, and you just got to go out and find them.
And I think we forget how, I think when we say the social aspect of it, we're probably thinking of it from an adult sort of mindset. We forget how easily children do socialise. I only look at my little boy when we go to a park, and like I say, he's 4.5, but he will literally just walk up to a group of children if they're in the middle of playing a game, and he just walks up to them and he starts playing the game with them. He just joins in. And it's like an adult would never do that, but children do. If they see 10 children running around tagging each other in a park, they'll just join in with each other. Children just go for it. They generally, unless you've got a particularly anxious child about doing it, but the 90% of the time they will just go and introduce themselves to children and make friends. And it's only when you sort of get into adulthood that you start going, okay, I can't just walk up to that person and introduce myself. Kids do.
And honestly, if your kid's going to be shy, they're going to do that at school too. They're going to do that at school too, so it doesn't matter. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I was incredibly shy and I went to public school. I would never have just walked up to a group of kids, but I wouldn't have done that at school. I wouldn't have done that had I been homeschooled. It wasn't me. So yeah, I mean, it also just depends on your kid's personality.
Yeah.
But they still have the interactions with other children.
Yeah. And going back to that with the kids, with your child's personality, that's the thing as a parent, when you're homeschooling, you can get that decision for yourself. You can sort of go, okay, my child is a little bit more anxious than 90% of the children out there. I'm not going to take him to a really busy centre where there is, 100 more children running around, as there would be in a playground at a school. If you have got an anxious child, they're still going to be anxious even at school, and they're pushed into this playground with the entire school out there in front of them, and they've just got to go off and expect to go and introduce themselves and make friends with people. They don't have that option at school. They you get your breaks, that's it. Whereas if you're homeschooling, you can say, right, well, maybe we'll go to a quieter centre where there's only a couple of children, and that's going to allow him to maybe get a little bit more comfortable there. If he doesn't want to go, then that's fine. You can make that decision for your child rather than having the school make that decision as to how they socialise.
Yeah, it's my son is definitely one of the ones who will not want to be around a bunch of kids. He does not want to be around a bunch of kids. And it's not just because they're kids. Like, he doesn't like crowds, and I don't like crowds. It's just a thing we both struggle with. So going somewhere where we know that there's going to be fewer people but still going to be kids is definitely more beneficial to him than having 70 to 100 kids on a playground.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned a couple of resources that you use for managing homeschooling. So we've got Trello and was it Epic, you said as well?
Yes, Epic.
Are there any other sort of resources or groups or sort of online education systems that you recommend for people that are homeschooling that you use?
Yeah, so for our biggest curriculum, we use something called Harbor and Sprout, and it is a nature-based curriculum, and they have primary and secondary units, but they have basically an overarching theme for the units, and within those, they have math, language arts, writing, science, they have a nature study, they have history, geography, math, something else too. And they're really great, and they're so beautiful, and they're like nature based, and my kids love them. So they're not very expensive. I think a unit, it says it's supposed to take 4 weeks, but it takes us closer to 8 to get through it all. And they're very easily adaptable to different levels and different abilities. Sorry. They're very adaptable to different levels and different abilities and interests. So even though they are mainly nature based, we just finished one about beekeeping. There were lots of things. We read Winnie the Pooh. We watched videos about how beekeeping works. We talked about hexagons for math. So it's all related.
Yeah.
And then they also have a construction unit that we're going to do. My son is very interested in the construction unit. They have a zoology unit we're going to do. So it's a really great program. And then as far as other things that we use, I guess Khan Academy is free. It doesn't go below second grade, which is why we don't use it a whole lot because my daughter's in first grade. But second grade and up, it's excellent. I used to use it with my students when I taught middle school. It's perfect. And then there are other things. We use OutSchool a lot, and that can get kind of pricey. And a lot of homeschooling families like mine are very budget conscious. So you got to pay attention to how much it costs per class and see if it's worth it for your family. But we do use OutSchool a lot, especially for like extracurricular type things. So my daughter, she's very interested in veterinary science. She takes a little veterinary science class for kids. My son does a Minecraft class. And then they both do a reading fluency group class so that they can collaborate with other kids their age. But that, I think OutSchool is another really great resource to have on hand.
Okay. And one of the questions that just kind of came to my head was, obviously you used to be in education yourself. For parents that have got concerns about the lack of their own education, because I know that is another issue that some parents may have, is that they want to home educate or homeschool their children, but they're concerned that they don't have enough of an education themselves to be able to teach their children. How would you sort of tell parents that isn't actually a necessity, that, you know, they can get help with other areas if they're not strong on them themselves?
Yeah. So my first thing that I tell people is that you are your child's first teacher. So people think that they don't have the skills to teach, but who taught your child how to eat? Who taught your child how to tie their shoes? Who taught your child, you know, everything they learned up to go into school? You did.
Yeah.
So if you can do that, you can teach them. You can teach them. And then if it's a subject you're not strong in, I know a lot of people really hate math. It's just like a thing. People hate math. They don't feel confident in it. If that is you, whether it be math or, you know, language or writing or whatever, you can always outsource it. There are a ton of online programs out there. Several of them are free that you can use to teach your kids what they need to know and to get the resources that you need. As long as you are following the expectations of your, you know, your laws, as long as you're following what the kids need to know, I think you're fine, whether you're the one actually teaching them or someone else. There are lots of homeschooling pods right now. They became very popular during the pandemic. There are, you know, there's things like OutSchool. There are tutors if you have the money to go a private tutor route. People who have people who have classes outside of school. So they do like their own sort of thing. They're usually tutors and former teachers or current teachers. There's always someone who can help you. And then also some things that I've done, I haven't done it a whole lot, but the way they teach math now is not how I learned math. And I did not teach primary school, so I don't know how to teach math the way they do now. So I've actually just taken some time on the weekends to study it and figure out how am I supposed to do this with my kids. So that's always an option as well, is for you to refresh. You don't have to know everything. If you don't feel confident doing it, you can outsource it. Otherwise, you have the skills needed to help your kids. You've helped them learn how to do everything up until this point. You have what it takes to teach them how to do this.
Yeah, lovely. Okay. So as we kind of wrap up, Sammy, if there's one thing that you would want parents to take away about homeschooling, especially those that might be thinking it's impossible to do it while working from home, what would that one thing be that you would sort of say to them? I think what you said about the fact that you've already got the experience as a parent anyway to teach children is fantastic, but is there anything else?
Just that, be flexible with it. And I know I've already said that, but that's the biggest thing, is to be willing to be flexible. It does not have to be rigid. It does not have to be this set schedule. It does not have to be 6 hours every single day where you all sit at the kitchen table, or, a little desk that you have. You don't even have to have a desk. We sit at the kitchen table. My kids sit on the floor and work sometimes. I mean, it doesn't, just be flexible. Do what works for you and your family, and that's enough.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Sammy. Really appreciate you coming on. It's been lovely to talk to you. There's so many kind of aspects of home education and homeschooling that I would kind of like to get into, but obviously it's difficult to kind of fit it all into one podcast. So maybe we can have you back on again at another time and go into it a little bit more. But thank you so much for coming on the show. Any of the links that Sammy has mentioned for any of the resources, the classes, we will put on the show notes, and obviously we will put all of Sammy's details as well. But do you want to just tell us a little bit about you, Sammy, and where we can find you if anyone wants to kind of come and contact you?
Yeah, so my business is called Bohannon Virtual Solutions. So I do have a website. It is bohannonvirtualsolutions.com. A lot of people struggle with the spelling though. So I am on Instagram. Threads is probably where I'm most active. It used to be Instagram, but I kind of moved to Threads.
Yeah,
But I'm also on Facebook, and my Facebook page is public. So anybody who has questions about homeschooling is welcome to message me on there and ask any questions. I'm more than willing to help. We all got to be in this together and help each other out. So definitely willing to help anybody who has any questions and not interested in the business side of things. So I am on Facebook. And then, so I was a public school teacher for 6 years, and then I taught online. Total, I guess I've been teaching about 10 years. I finally stopped teaching altogether just a few months ago, really. So I was still teaching and running my business for a while because I couldn't let it go, because I do love teaching. It just wasn't for me anymore. So I'm so glad that I get to do it at home with my kids, and I get to share that part of myself with them. So that's really great. My kids are 6 and 8, and we live in Mississippi in the US. Our homeschooling journey is just beginning. They're in 1st and 2nd grade, so we have a long way to go, but I'm excited to see where it takes us.
Lovely. Yeah, well, good luck to you, Sammy. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And we'll see everyone on the next episode of For All Stages and Ages. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
I wanted to give you a quick overview of the Empower and Learn for All Stages and Ages course. This is our main course that comes with the parenting community platform as well. So just to give you a quick overview of what is actually included in the course. So we've got where you start from, and you can pick and choose which ones you want out of this. You don't need to follow it all the way through if these aren't relevant for you. We've got an investing in yourself section. This is self-investment and how you can improve yourself. We've got navigating life stages and ages. So this is more about the child development side, child brain development, different stages of life. Then we've got pregnancy and newborns. So we've got a full subsection of pregnancy and newborns, including postpartum self-care, milestones, bonding. Then we go into toddlerhood and early childhood. So again, this is toddler milestones, discipline strategies, teething, language development. New section that's going to be coming really soon is adolescents and teenagers. So again, this is all going to be relevant for parents that have got adolescents and teenagers. Powering the next generation. How can we as parents make sure that our children grow up empowered and feel like they can conquer the world, basically? Mindfulness and mental health. We've got all things food. So this is baby-led weaning, baby weaning, recipes. We've got a full subsection here where you can go in and download loads of fun and healthy recipes for you and your baby. We've got a video on baby weaning, a full section of childhood nutrition. We've got a subsection on homeschooling. Online safety. How do you keep your children safe? Sweet dreams. So this is for those of you that are struggling with sleeping. So various sleeping tips. And then we've also got the Teen Talk Toolkit. Now this is new. So this is going to be answering some of those more hard-hitting teen questions. So things around the sex talk chat, drugs, alcohol, bullying, anything around those kind of issues. This is going to be where all of that is housed and how best parents can deal with those. Then we've got the Toddler Emotion series. This is all about toddler behaviours, toddler emotions. How do you promote positive behaviour in toddlers and children? And then we've got the outdoor activity ideas. So we've got a full module on outdoor activities with PDFs, activities that you can download to be able to go and do with your children. And then, of course, we've got the community platform. This is where parents can go in and they can view podcast episodes on video that we've covered various different things. We will also put PDFs. We will put any information in this platform as well. If we're arranging meetups, if we're arranging in-person events, challenges for parents that we're going to be giving you, questions that are being asked, and we're going to be answering them in here. If we do or hold any webinars, you will be able to get access to them in here as well. So this is just to kind of give you an idea of what is actually included in the Empower and Learn course.